Hi everybody, this is Barry from Knitting for Love, and today's video we're going to talk about how to gauge your work, especially when you need to make something like a garment. Now, since I make my own patterns, if you were to look at a pattern, and I have one here that says, because most patterns will, I don't know if you can see that, but it says here at the gauge, it says, and this is for you to make a swatch before you begin your knitting. The importance of making a gauge is so that your garment will fit. If you just follow the instructions given, every person's knitting is different, so every person's gauge is slightly different. Your garment will either be too big or too tight. So you have to know how many stitches per inch you actually knit with the tools you're knitting with. So in this case, this gauge says 14 stitches to 4 inches. So that's every 14 stitches you've made 4 inches. Okay, so if you think about that, and you can do the math and draw up your own plans for your own sweater. But if your gauge is not measuring, say hypothetically speaking, that requested you to use a size 7 needle with the specific yarn required, your gauge might be 13 stitches per 4 inches, or it might be 16 stitches per 4 inches. So those added stitches per inch can either add up over time, or your outfit will be too small. So you really want to check your gauge first. It's very important to do a swatch. That way you can know how your knitting is going to turn out. Now, I've made these 2 swatches, and they do look very, very similar. One's upside down. But they are very, very similar. And there's only one difference. The swatch on the right was knitted with size 7 needles. Same yarn. The swatch on the left is knitted with size 6 knitting needles. So basically, you can see that the stitches are slightly smaller on this side than they are on this side. Now, to use your gauge, we can choose how to do this, because I like to do per inch, but this is per 4 inches is a cutout of my Susan Bates Knit Check, which is great. I love this thing. But how we do this is we're going to knit a swatch, and you can cast on 20 stitches and knit so many if you want. And if you want to knit an even square, what you would do is while you're knitting, fold it from corner to corner to make sure that you have a perfect square. And then what you do is, to get it to lay flat, like I have mine laying flat, you dampen it a little, and then you pin it down to a piece of styrofoam in order for it to take its shape and correct any stitches that you may have here. But to calculate your gauge, you're going to lay your gauge down on your work, and then you're going to count your stitches. Now, I have this stitch here, which is a V, so that is one whole stitch, which is upside down V. So there it is. It is a V. So I'm going to start there. Actually, I'm going to move it over so I can get all the stitches. So there's my first stitch. So then I'm going to count across 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I have 8 stitches per 4 inches. Oh, in this case, per 2 inches, sorry. So 8 stitches per 2 inches, which gives me 16 stitches per 14 stitch per 4 inches. Now if I was making that pattern that I just showed you, my gauge on a size 7 knitting needle is too large. Even though the pattern may have requested you to use a size 7, my knitting is too large for size 7, which is 2 stitches too large. So if I go and I do the same thing with this one, which is a size 6, I'm going to count. And again, it's 8. So it didn't really matter between the needle size for this, between a 6 and a 7. But if you did a 5, it might make a big difference. It may have lowered it down. So you have to keep practicing your swatches until you get the right needle size for your work. This here is just what's on the back of any pattern. And this is a suggested needle size. Let's see if I can get that into focus for you. There we go. And the suggested needle size for this is a size US 6. And that's per 4 inches. And you're going to get 22 stitches per 4 inches. So again, this is just a suggestion for this yarn. And I have followed the suggestion. Sometimes the knitting is just too loose for me. So I go down a needle size or 2 needle sizes. And then I pick this up. And then you also have your washing instructions. But you definitely want to, if you're creating your own patterns, you would do a gauge before you start your work, because you'd want to measure out your waist, your shoulders, your arm length, around your bust line. You know, any areas of your sweater that needs to fit well, you're going to do your gauge, find out how many stitches per 2 inches you have, and then do the math versus, you know, if your waist is 26 inches around, you're going to take, this was 8 stitches for 2 inches, and I say 26 inches around, so you're going to divide that by 2 is 13, and then you're going to multiply by 8 to get how many stitches you need to cast on. But gauging your work is very important. Not so important if you want to make a scarf, a shawl, anything that doesn't require it being fitted. Hats, socks, sweaters need to be fitted. So you need to get your size correct. And some patterns will give you how many you need to cast on for a small, medium, and large. Instead of using the small, if your gauge is too small, go up to a medium. Cast on the medium. Don't cast on the small because you don't have enough stitches to actually create the small and fit it. Even if you are a small, you're not going to fit that sweater properly. So I would say go up to a medium and use the descriptions in the pattern for a medium-sized sweater. Now, the only difference I probably will see is the amount of rows it takes, because one is smaller than the other. And I'm going to go 1, 2. This is 10 inches, 10 rows for 2 inches. And this is 11 rows for 2 inches. So there's the difference between the two, is I actually got one more row using a smaller size needle than the size 7. So the 7 got 10 rows and 8 stitches across, where the size 6 needle got 11 rows and 8 stitches across. So there's a big difference there. Your garment might come out too long if you followed this one versus this one. Some people don't like working with smaller size needles. It's just something to get used to. Find what works for you. But again, I hope this was informative for all you people out there looking to make your own garments. It's a fun thing to do, and it's also fun to calculate and sit down and say, well, if I'm going to make a pillow, how big should my pillow be? And if you know you want your pillow to be 6 inches length by 9 inches, or a very nice rectangular pillow, then you might want to go with the smaller needle because it's going to give you more of a rectangular as you go, versus this is going to be a square. It's going to stay a square. And I can have another video on how to knit the perfect square regardless of the number of stitches you have on your and regardless to the number type of yarn you have. Well, like, share, subscribe. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you're used to gauging your work, or do you just jump in and see where it takes you, because sometimes that could be a good thing too. But I find sweaters really need to be gauged. Socks is a variable. Most sock yarns require you to, the sock is written so it would fit a range of sizes, like say size 8 to 10. So anywhere in there, you're going to be a safe zone if you're a size 9. So it might be safe enough for you to just go jump right in. But a sweater is a little bit different. And plus, we're all different shapes. So, what fit one person may not fit the next person. Again, no two knitters are alike. No two knitting is alike. You may actually gauge using worsted weight yarn with the same size needle I just did, and you will probably come out with a different number than I did, because my gauge is my gauge. The book only suggests that this is the gauge you need to acquire in order to make this pattern fit for those sizes. But again, when you knit this up and you gauge your own work, your gauge will be probably different than anyone else's, especially if you're a beginner. You might be knitting really, really loose, which loose knitting makes objects bigger. Really, really tight knitters makes objects smaller. So again, gauge is very important to learn where your gauge is. That's why it's all based on you, and this is the reason why they put a gauge in the patterns. It's just a suggested gauge, not a mandatory gauge. Okay, so hope you like this video. Happy knitting. Bye now.